Dr. Parsi. Dr. Trita Parsi is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. QuincyInst.org is the website, or responsiblestatecraft.org. T. Parsi on Twitter. Dr. Parsi, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we talked.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, always a pleasure. I'm curious your thoughts on Mr. Netanyahu and the possibility of a conflagration in the Middle East. I mean, you might want to give us just a quick snapshot of what has happened, since October 7th, and how Netanyahu has been handling this, and what this might mean.
So let me just give a snapshot of the last 2 weeks, because a lot has happened since October 7th. But just in the last 2 weeks, Netanyahu has dramatically escalated matters in the Middle East. He assassinated the number 2 of Hezbollah in Beirut, leaving the world waiting for a Hezbollah retaliation. But before Hezbollah even got a chance to retaliate, he did something even more audacious, which is that he assassinated the political leader of Hamas in Tehran, in Iran, during the new Iranian president's inauguration. And it's impossible to conclude that this was not done, at least with a desire to see things escalate further in the region and drag the United States into that war.
Well,
now the world and the entire Middle East is bracing itself to see what the Iranian and Hezbollah response to this will be, and if that will lead to a full-scale war or not.
Right, and when he assassinated the Hamas leader, he also assassinated his negotiating partner, did he not? I mean, great way to stop the negotiations dead in the tracks.
Absolutely. If there ever was any doubt that Netanyahu is not interested in a ceasefire, he is not interested in a deal that gets the Israeli hostages freed, was the fact that he then assassinated the guy on the other side of the negotiating table.
Right.
And this was done, incidentally, a day and a half after the head of Mossad and the head of the CIA were meeting to discuss a prisoner swap and a ceasefire deal. In the Middle East, many have concluded that that's an indication that the U.S. was in on it. I don't share that interpretation. I don't think the Biden administration was in on it. I think this is a scenario in which the Netanyahu government and Netanyahu himself feels a tremendous amount of pleasure and no hesitation whatsoever to screw over the United States in this manner, because this was deeply embarrassing to the Biden administration as well, particularly after Biden has gone around and said that, this negotiating proposal that he put on the table is actually Israel's proposal. It clearly is not, because Netanyahu is not interested in any peace deal.
So, and Netanyahu is very clearly interested in Donald Trump being the next president of the United States. I mean, he's done and nearly said so as much. A cynical perspective on this, and color me cynical, this is my belief, is that Netanyahu has been charged with taking bribes, with being, just nakedly corrupt as the leader of Israel, as the prime minister of Israel. And as long as he's in office, they can't proceed with those prosecutions and throw him in prison. The minute he's out of office, there's a very good chance he's going to end up in prison for years. And so it seems to me that he's trying to extend this war, expand this war, and maybe even drag the United States into the war, just for his own personal interest, just to stay out of jail. Am I just being super cynical here, or is that actually?
Absolutely. No, not at all. I think in some ways perhaps you're not being cynical enough, because this is openly discussed in Israeli media. Mm-hmm. You have family members of the hostages openly saying this, but also others. The former deputy head of the Israeli National Security Council just tweeted it the other day, saying that Netanyahu is trying to expand the war. He doesn't want to have a peace, and he wants to drag the U.S. into the war, and he's doing so because of his desire to stand out of jail. Because, as you just correctly pointed out, once the war is over and his government collapses, these charges will move forward, and he will likely end up in jail. What is shocking in all of this is not that part, because this is the conduct that Netanyahu has always had. What's shocking is that President Biden, for some reason, assumed that he actually has an honest broker, an honest partner in Netanyahu, and that he's not been led astray and betrayed by Netanyahu. He clearly has, as you pointed out. He would like to see Trump get reelected. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does a lot of escalation in the next coming weeks as a way of further undermining Biden and the election prospects of the Kamala Harris presidency.
Yeah.
But I think we should also be honest about the fact that he is also, by escalating, potentially seeking to corner Trump and make sure that by the time Trump comes in case Trump wins the elections, that he too will then be faced with an existing crisis that removes Trump's maneuverability and ability to take initiative. Instead, he will be forced to react to the crisis that Netanyahu deliberately has created.
So what's the worst case situation here? I mean, I'm imagining, and again, I'm no expert in this region of the world. I mean, I've been there many, many times, but I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. But it seems to me like the worst case scenario would be Iran is, weeks or months away from developing a nuclear weapon. They take some sort of retaliatory action for this assassination. And Israel overreacts by dropping a tactical nuke into Iran, or some just massive bomb that blows up one of their facilities. And then at the same time, my understanding is that Hezbollah in Lebanon, just north of Israel, has sufficient rocket firepower that between them and Iran, if they were to seriously attack Israel from the air, the Iron Dome defenses would be overwhelmed. In which case Israel might resort to a nuclear weapon, and then you'd have just a full-out conflagration in the Middle East. Is that too far out a scenario to contemplate?
I think there's a couple of steps prior to that. I think what we'll likely see is a very strong response by the Iranians, and then the question is how the Israelis react to that. Mm. If they end up retaliating further and then do so in a disproportionate manner, the signal from Iran is that they have already several waves of additional attacks ready. In that scenario in which you have missiles being shot from Lebanon, missiles from Iran, from Iraqi and Syrian militias, as well as from the Houthis, it will overwhelm Israel's air defenses. Even the attack in April by Iran did overwhelm it to a certain extent. If Israel then takes a lot of hits and significant damage, before it even considers tactical nukes and things of that nature, it will push to drag the U.S. into the war. And given the deference that the Biden administration has shown Israel so far, it's not difficult to imagine that at least in Netanyahu's calculation, he will not have great difficulties getting the U.S. involved in that war. We have already moved a significant amount of troops and ships to the region already. We're signaling and we're saying openly that we will participate on Israel's side in such a confrontation.
Yeah, which it seems could be very dangerous on the one hand, expanding the war and dragging the United States into it. On the other hand, what would be the blowback, what would be the consequence here in the United States politically as well as just policy-wise if we didn't participate? I mean, there's some speculation. The United States military and I believe it was Qatar, or was it the UAE, contributed missiles to stop, to help the Iron Dome repel that last attack. If we were to fail to do that, what would that mean? What would the consequence of that be?
Well, so there is this belief that the political reality is such that the U.S. absolutely has to, for political reasons, get involved. Mm-hmm. That may have been the case at some point. I'm not so sure it is any longer. Just today, a new poll was published that showed that for the first time in a very long time, a majority of Americans do not believe that the United States should defend Israel in case Israel drags itself into another war in the region. So this idea that the political reality is such a no-brainer and the U.S. has to do so because of the politics of Washington. The politics of Washington has changed. We saw today that Kamala Harris did not choose Josh Shapiro, but instead chose Tim Walz. At least part of the decision or the factors leading her to the decision appears to have been a significant backlash against Shapiro because of his positions on Israel and Palestine, dating back 20 years, but also very much recently, things that he has done against the BDS movement, things that he said about the protesters against the Gaza war, etc. So we saw that for the first time, that degree of proximity that he had with Israeli policies actually was a political negative. It was not a merit for his case. It may actually have been one of the strongest factors as to why he wasn't chosen. the politics of this has already changed on the Democratic side. And some people predict that it will change as well, perhaps not as strongly, but it will change as well on the Republican side in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating, amazing, and incredibly dangerous situation. Dr. Trita Parsi, I always appreciate your insights. Thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Always an honor.